Good evening. Turn with me to chapter 5 of Ecclesiastes. It says, "Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifices of fools, for they consider not that they do evil." Lord, thank you for your word, and thank you for just being with us and guiding us and empowering us and showing us what your word is to mean to each of us individually. Lord, you leave nothing unturned when it comes to our life with you. And I just ask that you open your word more and more to us, because we so much need to know it in these days. Everybody needed to know it, no matter what time they live in, but we really need to be able to stand in the darkness of these days. And I really pray that you just take your words and impart them into our spirit and our soul. I say this in your name, amen. You know, the preacher has been leading us through a maze in this book. It's quite a maze. You know, when you look at the results of him wading through the world and his goal to basically to experience everything, which would mean from a fleshly aspect. And all of it is to come to a place where he realizes that it leads nowhere. And that's what the world and the flesh does. It leads nowhere. Except disappointment, disillusionment, all those things that we are trying to avoid in this world. We're trying to control our reality so we can avoid those things. And we can't help but run right headlong into them, because the world is what the world is and the flesh is what the flesh is. Now, all we have to understand about this whole thing is that it's vanity. When you're trying to wade through fleshly and worldly maze, you're doing it to find out what the preacher has discovered and his conclusions about what he has discovered. If we would wisely do that, if we could get our young people to wisely do that, even if we could get Christians to wisely do that, they might make some different decisions. Their priorities may be different. Now, when you look at this preacher, you realize that in the first chapter it was within his heart to find purpose in this world. That's what was in his heart. And he felt that if he could experience much in this world, that he could bring a different perspective, maybe show that there is a reason, a purpose for us being here besides that religious part of it. I think that's what he was really looking at. He was certain that he could change matters if only he could find the reason for us being here. And to him the key was wisdom. If he could understand, he would have the wisdom to handle it properly and to show others the right way. However, after discovering all the emptiness of such a pursuit, the preacher realized it was vanity to find such purpose, to try to, in the world and in the flesh, that had no purpose. It had no reasoning to it. Now, the reason for such vanity is because one can't find any substantial reason or lasting benefits when it comes to pursuing the world. Every time someone pursues the world, it doesn't matter who they are, it comes to a point of emptiness. There's disillusionment, there's dissatisfaction, because what you hope to find is not there. There's no substance. There's nothing behind the world or the flesh. Now, because he began to realize that it was his pursuit for the world, in the world, and for the flesh was all vain. So it left him vexation of spirit. And this is why so many people have a vexation spirit, because their whole essence of their life here means nothing. It ends in nothing. What they gain, they lose. And so it's a real conflict for most people. They're miserable, really. When you look at people who are trying to find some purpose in this world and try to situate it according to what they think would be important, they find out that nothing comes together for them because they're in this world. Now, this preacher had to look at everything he could to make sure that his logic and his reasons, his conclusions were right. And his next attempt was to find meaning and pleasure. If you can't find meaning in the world and you can't find meaning in flesh, maybe you can find pleasure, find meaning in pleasure. Maybe there's something there. And so he looks at that, and he also thought maybe great works would bring that meaning to my life. But again, it all proved to be vanity because it was all temporary. It would basically fade in the end. His next attempt, and you can follow this, was maybe he could create or leave behind a legacy down the line. But then he began to realize, based on humanity, it would be discarded. It would be used up. It would be cast aside. And so again, he had to realize it was vanity. Even trying to leave a physical legacy, a worldly legacy behind, it was all vanity. So can you imagine how discouraged he got in his journeys? He had to be greatly discouraged. He described it, of course, as vexation spirit. Now he realized that God gives man what is good. Man does not earn it. Man does not obtain it in his own power. God has to bless. God has to give. And so he came to that realization. He had to realize that if he was going to enjoy anything, he had to recognize it was what God had given him in the first place. He had to simply enjoy his labors. Otherwise, it was all vanity because there was nothing lasting, eternal, or forever to it. Now, this is where he had to admit that there's a season for everything. A season for everything. And that season is important to understand because it determines your labors. It determines where you're going to be successful in them or not. So he had to recognize that there was a season for everything. That which is done in the world will not last. It will not last. Seasons bring in changes for a reason. And again, it comes back to ensuring the cycle of life. But you have to be in that cycle. You have to understand it. You have to not try to push it aside or try to ignore it, but be available to do what you can do in that season. The problem with so many people is they're not willing, they're not open, they're not available. They want the seasons to adjust to them. They don't want to discern the season in order to walk it out properly and do what they need to do to prepare for that season. So when it comes down to it, everything done under the sun, the labors done under the sun, basically amount to not much. So you have to come back to, why am I here? That which is done in this world will not last. That's the bottom line. Man can't change the seasons. He has to wisely recognize the labor that's necessary for that time, of course, to maintain that, basically that current of life. But the preacher had to keep coming to dead ends to realize that. Every pursuit led to the dead end. The only thing that gave him any hope is, you know what? God gives what we need, and He wants us to enjoy those labors because that's our portion when it comes to the world. So if you're not investing, you're not laboring in anything in this world, you have no portion in anything. That's your only portion when it comes to this world. God only gives that which is good. But you have to recognize it that He gives it. It's not your great work. If God doesn't put His finger of blessing on it, it goes nowhere. Now, Jeanette and I have experienced that. Many times we would be serving the Lord, and I would say to the Lord, if you don't touch this, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to change. Nothing's going to be different. You have to touch it. It's not my work. It's not Jeanette's work. It's your work that's going to count. We have to understand that because, number one, we have to be thankful for what He does give us and know that in that giving, He's given us the opportunity to be vessels that can help others. I've been reading in Deuteronomy. There's some incredible, of course, passages there. But one of the things that really came out is that God told them, I bless you so you can bless others. The thing that He said, there should be no poor among you. What He was saying is, I bless you enough that you can become conduits to those who are in need, and they don't have to remain poor. He went on to say, you will always have the poor among you. I thought, is that a contradiction? It wasn't. What He's saying is, you're not going to do it, and you're always going to have the poor among you, and they're going to be your test. And you're going to fail it every time. If you ask me if the church is failing that test, yes, they are. They would rather give to missionaries overseas, which I have no problem. We support missionaries. But you have to take care of those that are in front of you, because basically that's where the greatest blessings come. So it's very interesting reading that our portion comes from our labors, because everything comes from God. Everything should bring glory to Him. And so this preacher understood that, but we don't understand it. Today, in the abundance of America, we've lost our way. When it comes to simple principles of God. Now, the preacher soberly warned that all will stand before the God of the universe, and that He will judge each according to their works. Therefore, they should be wise and fear God. Now, I want you to understand, the fear of the Lord is a major theme all through this book. Because if you don't fear God, you're not going to fear consequences. You're not going to say, look, this is consequences I'm going to make, so I need to make the right choices. If you don't understand consequences, you will never make the right choices. If you're not challenged to consider your ways and where it leads you, you will not make the right choices. People will always make decisions according to their flesh and their worldly pursuits, and never according to what's right. If you don't believe me, look around you. I watch young people today make wrong decisions. And you know why? Because they haven't paid the consequences. They don't understand there's a price with wrong decisions. They may not pay it up front, but they're going to pay it down the line. They have no fear of God. He goes on to admit that everything done under the sun by man is oppressive. It's oppressive. It enslaves you. And it does. It enslaves you. How much do we do because we're enslaved to the government? How much does Carrie do because she's enslaved in the educational system? Now, these disciplines are not necessarily wrong, but they enslave people because they don't allow people to come to terms with their own talents and abilities to reach their potential, to make sure the best comes out of it. There's nothing but oppression under the sun because man enslaves man. Yes, he's probably saying still, but man enslaves man. And that's what we're seeing. Man systems enslaves man. Tyrants enslaves man. Despots enslaves man. We could go on as to what enslaves mankind. We could go around and say we're free, but we have to stand and admit we are servants. We're slaves to something. So what are you a slave to? Well, I'll tell you right now, I'm a bondservant to the Lord. You could call me a slave, but I'm a happy slave because I do it because I love the Lord. That's what a bondservant is. They consecrate everything to their master because of love. Slaves are forced. Servants have responsibilities and consequences. But as a bondservant, I'm that way because I chose my master, my Lord. And the problem is that Christians have not chose Jesus to be their sole Lord. And they are being tossed to and fro, and they're finding their master to be hard and terrible because it's not Jesus. So he says, man is oppressed. And oppression abounds because man has iniquity in him that causes him to become self-serving, jealous, and unreasonable. We can all see this through the first 4 chapters. What he's saying. Boy, he had to learn a lot. You see, he understood to become stiff-necked towards God comes down to you refusing to wisely humble yourself before him. And why? Because of your arrogance. And arrogance ends up being treacherous, tyrannical, and irrational when challenged. And that's what we're seeing today. We are seeing what we're seeing because those people out there reacting are oppressed and they're serving Satan. That's the bottom line. The problem is when leaders of greed and power, when they become those leaders who are after greed and power, guess what? They lose wisdom. They lose it. They don't have any wisdom. In fact, they also lose the way of righteousness. That's what we're seeing. Now, the reason I'm talking about this is that the preacher talked about all those born within his kingdom will find themselves poor. We all start out poor. Poor in spirit. This is true for the church as well. Those who are the poorest are those who are spiritually poor, and this happens because of weak leadership in the church, for instance. If you have a poor congregation spiritually, I'm not talking about physical, a poor congregation spiritually, it's because of your leadership. Pastors, up. Get before your almighty God and find out what your sheep, what kind of condition they are in. Because that's going to tell you what kind of leadership you have. So the poorest, if a congregation is poor in spirit and in faith, it's because of the leadership. Most likely. You have to remember this is true for every leadership, because what does Proverbs 14:34, it says, righteousness exalts a nation. Our nation is going down. It's drowning because there's no righteousness, because the people have been sitting and letting wicked people run all over the place. Now, granted, they didn't know what to do. But how many are still asleep in the church and refusing to admit what's been going on? Because we have not stood in the gap. We have not been responsible. When you look at what God told the people who were going to Babylon, He said, pray for the peace of Babylon. Yes, establish yourself. But pray for the peace of Babylon, because when they don't have peace, you're not going to have peace. What did the leaders like Daniel did? They stood. They didn't, well, that's political. That's not my problem. You know what? If Daniel hadn't stood, he would have been dead. If Daniel hadn't stood, there wouldn't have been a witness to Nebuchadnezzar. He would be dead in his sins. If Daniel hadn't stood for righteousness, he would have not been exalted in the kingdom of Persia, Medo-Persia, the Medo-Persian kingdom. He would have not been exalted. So sit and see where it's going to get you. Be quiet. Criticize everybody else that's taking a stand. And I see it on Facebook all the time with these Christians. You show me that in Scripture. You show me that in Scripture. You show me an example where the righteous man sat down and said nothing. Where to stand. And you know where the greatest failure of standing is in the church itself. Men are not standing for righteousness. They're not standing against sin. They won't call sin sin. And they wonder why their people are lifeless, dead, and the only time they can be roused up is emotionally. Not spiritually, emotionally. You have to realize righteousness exalts a nation. The concept of nation points to a people, a society, and a community. But the opposite of righteousness is wickedness, which becomes a reproach or shame and bitterness to the people. I am bitter in this nation. What I'm seeing, what I'm tasting is bitterness to me. I'm not a bitter person, but I can't handle sometimes what I'm seeing. It is terrible. It's vexation of the spirit. I don't kid myself. I don't know if what is going on in this nation can be reversed. I don't know if we stepped over the line as a nation and we're going to have to be judged. For abortions. For what? Endless things. Do you know something? Many years ago, our friend Betty Swinford saw what's happened. She said, I see boots coming across the border. You know what those boots are about? They're our judgment. Those boots, this invasion is our judgment. And it started with wickedness of Obama. It started with that little complacency of the Bushes. They're just as wicked as Obama. You see, we were asleep. The church was asleep. They could do whatever as long as they left us in our pews, believing lies. People, we need to wake up. I'm not saying that this nation is above or beyond saving. God told Abraham, if I find 10 men in there that are righteous, I'll save Sodom and Gomorrah. Again, I don't know what percentage that would be for America. But I'm going to tell you something. It's never going to be enough. Until every
knee of everyone that calls themselves a Christian gets on their face and repents for their indifference. I've repented. I haven't been necessarily indifferent, Jeanette, and I have warned people when Obama got in, he's communist, he's socialist. Why are you letting him in? He's totally contrary to the Constitution of the United States. It's coming out now that he wasn't born in America. That will be basically, will undo everything he's done in his administration. But we knew that. But how many people want to be honest, okay? What we have to understand is that man is always making men prey. Men are always becoming prey to others, okay? Subject to their tyranny, subject to wicked practices, and always coming up against evil agendas. It may not always be on a large scale, but I'm going to tell you, oppression is everywhere. It's like a blanket. Nothing about such oppression changes people. It doesn't change until you come out underneath it in the liberty of Jesus Christ and His truth. Generations may come and they may go, but they often fail to learn the lessons of the past. Because why? They end up following those of their present generation. He realized that. Now, these individuals may have strength, but they're inexperienced. They do not know the history. And guess what? Most of them don't care. History repeats itself because we never learn it. We never learn the lessons. We never take them seriously. We think we're different, we're better, that we're a greater generation, and all that these generations become in that thinking are greater fools that are falling more and more into the traps of the world. You see, many can't see why they should care. They don't comply or take notice, because in their mind, every generation is different. But I want you to know, it's not different. And what it comes down to is moral challenges. Every generation is faced with the same moral challenges, the same issue of God, the same matter of the cross, the same reality of redemption and salvation. Every generation is faced with that. The previous oppression each generation finds himself in often becomes more oppressive to the next generation. I want you to know my generation did not help Carrie's generation. And Carrie's generation isn't very effective in this new generation. Because each generation is conditioned to close their ears, close their eyes, so that they can go straight to hell without knowing it. In fact, I see more reality in our children than I do in this generation that's supposed to become leaders. Our children are getting it. You know why? Because their parents are finally waking up and getting it. They're finally realizing, if I don't fight, I leave nothing for my children. They will curse me. I often wonder how many generations they're going to curse my generation. The liberals. Those liberals became leaders like Obama and Ayers and others that just ripped our culture apart. Anything with any kind of sacredness, they ripped it apart. They mocked it. And where was the church? What was it telling the people? Now, when it comes to mankind, it comes back to the fact that if they do not get wise, they remain base like the beasts. That's what they do. They become like them. They remain indifferent to God. They're hateful towards those who do not go along with their wicked philosophies that they have been conditioned with, especially through the educational system. It is because of sin, an ungodly environment, many end up alone in different ways. We talked about being alone. Some say when it comes to health, loneliness is as bad as smoking many packs of cigarettes a day. And yet how many are alone? The preacher knows that man is not good alone, but he ends up there physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The truth is, relationships are the only thing that can truly affect the dynamics of a person's life. What kind of relationships do you have? Now, it takes two to have a relationship, and there are people that just cannot get on board with having a relationship. They want a dictatorship. Man in his selfishness makes relationships all about himself. How do you like having a relationship with yourself? That's what most people do. The only relationship they have is with themselves. They're alone because of it. They think unless it serves them, when it comes down to what they want, they will reject anything outside of that in cruelty. They'll tear it down to control it. They'll abuse it to gain control, and they always resent the relationship when they can't be God in it. That's the essence of man. I wonder why Jesus said, deny yourself, pick up the cross, and follow me. Now, relationships are meant to be a type of teamwork where two work together in agreement for a greater cause than just themselves. See, most married couples don't get past that. It's all about me, myself, and I. But marriage is meant to be a teamwork that works for something that is greater than the two of them. It has to be. So there's this teamwork, and you have to get past self, but when three are bound in agreement, they will stand because they can't be disrupted in their stance and from their course. The world thinks in terms of greatness that ensures success, but in God's economy, it's those who know they are poor in spirit that prove to be the richest in the end, especially when it comes to faith. James 2:5. Each generation must step into the shoes of past generations when it comes to the world, and sadly they will lead others as they see fit, and that's what we're seeing. People are doing things that they think is right in their own eyes. That's what happened in Judges, and they were constantly brought into bondage because of that. We're in bondage because of that. If you're full of self, you're in total bondage to yourself. You need to keep that in mind. So what does he do? It's for this reason it seems that all is vanity because, guess what? The past does not influence the present, and the present will not persuade the future in the ways of wisdom. So what is he going to do with this? It's hopeless. He's looked to the world. He's looked to the flesh. He has seen that everything under the sun, when it comes to man, is oppressive. Not much hope. So where's this going to lead the preacher? Well, let's read it again, because to me it was just powerful. This is why I went through all this. I wanted you to have the contrast. Because this is usually what happens finally. Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God. Where did he end up at? the house of God. Wow, if he had gone there in the first place, he probably would have been spared of a lot of stupid things. He finally comes to the house of God. And notice what he says, keep thy foot, beware of how you enter the house of God. And be more ready to what? To hear. You have to remember when he started this, he didn't ask God anything. He assumed. But now he's going to the house of God to do what? To hear what God really has to say. I don't know about you, but even when I became a Christian, God was the last one I would consult. And yet he brought me to the place in my life that he was the only one I could consult, because he's the only one that could solve my problems. He's the only one that could answer my question. Then he goes, be ready, more ready to hear than to what? Give the sacrifice of fools. Think about that. For they consider not that they do evil. Think about what he's saying here. I mean, he is really making an incredible statement. How much do we miss that statement? How many times did Jesus instruct us to hear what the Spirit is saying? So the question is, why are you here? I asked that question one time. Why are you here? It was in church. Why are you here in a place of worship? The answer should be one thing, to hear. And why do I want to hear God? So I can do business with God. So I can find out if there's things in my life that are not right, what direction to go in, what he wants me to understand about the times I live in, about the steps I'm taking. That's why you're there. To hear what God is saying so you can do business with the Lord. So you can freely worship him in spirit and truth. If you're not in the right spirit, you can't worship him. If you're not seeking to know the truth, you're not going to be worshiping him. People, if you do not enter the house of God as a worshiper to hear him, then why enter it at all? You're not winning brownie points. He's not impressed. He's not marking in heaven how many times you went to church. He's not marking how many times you got up there and sang some songs. He's listening to you. To whether you really worship him, whether you've really come to do business with him, whether it matters how he looks at things to you, or whether you're doing your own little religious thing. We got to come back to that. So if you do enter in as a duty in a wrong spirit, you will be considered a fool. Think about what I'm saying. If you go to that place called the place of worship, and you go there for no other reason, for the main reason of hearing God, the Bible is calling you a fool. Why? Because by your actions and your attitudes, you're saying there is no God. You're playing the game. You're giving the impression. But in your heart, when God sees it, you don't believe he even exists. Because if you did, you would fear him. And if you feared him, you would not be flippant and casual about how you entered his house. So how important is the fear of the Lord? I want you to think about that for a second. What is this man going to see when he goes to the house of God? What is the house of God? It's the temple. Now I'm going to bring this up a couple of times. But remember, It was because of this preacher that temple was built. It is this preacher that dedicated this temple. So what will he see when he goes to the house of God? It's very important what he sees. Because what he acknowledges up front is you've got to make sure you're not a hypocrite. Why? Because he had to see the hypocrites. There's no greater hypocrites than in religion. Remember, hypocrites, actors and actresses were called hypocrites. That's their profession. But when being a hypocrite is a religious profession, you're the worst of all. I want you to keep that in mind. This man who saw this temple made, this man who dedicated this temple has gone to the house of God, the temple, and what does he see? Well, he sees fools making sacrifices. And he says, beware of how you enter. Now notice something else he says. Let's look in verse 2 there. It says, be not rash with thy mouth. How many empty promises, empty worship, empty declarations are made in churches to God. Now, people may not believe they're speaking to God, but God hears them. He hears every word. Now, remember, do not, in zeal, make some religious declarations you do not mean. That's what it means. Don't do it. Don't make declarations you have no intentions of backing them up with proper action. Don't do that. How many people do that? Let's go on and see. And let not thy heart be hasty to utter anything before God. Don't let your heart be what? Hasty, impulsive. About what? Volunteering. About saying you'll do something when you have no intention of doing it. Because it makes you look good or it makes you feel good at that moment. What did that man hear when he went to the house of God? What did that man see when he went to the house of God? I can tell you right now, the same things we will see. Man doesn't change. He doesn't change in the games he plays. He doesn't change. It's just the way he is. He says, don't be hasty. It says, do not make vows. That says that in verse 4. Doesn't it? Do not make vows. Now we're going to get into this a little bit more, but do not make vows that make you feel good because, it makes you feel good, but you let it fall to the wayside. Do not do that. Consider Jonah. He's in the belly of the fish. Now Jonah most likely made a vow to God. And the vow was, I will serve you. I will go where you want me to go. I will share the message you want me to share. But when God asked Jonah to go to Nineveh, what happened? Well, God just prepared a fish for him. So he's in the fish. And what is the one thing he says in Jonah 2:9? I will read it to you. But I will sacrifice unto thee with a voice of thanksgiving. I will pay that I have vowed. Salvation is of the Lord. He says, I'm going to pay my vows. So the next time we see him going to Nineveh, I have people say, well, I made a deal with God. I made a bargain with God. If this happened, then I would serve him. And I said, did it happen? Yes. Are you serving him? No. It's easy to do. Guard your heart. Guard your mouth. And make sure it's something you can pay and you're going to keep to the end. Your word should be law to you. You know, lame intentions will wane with temporary zeal, but there is no heart commitment when you make that type of commitment. There's no heart in it. It's just your big mouth running off. There's no sober attitude to see a matter through. It doesn't mean anything to you. There's no faith to walk it out in obedience because you don't really believe it. Because you don't believe God either. And such intentions will become indictments to you on the day of judgment. Someone said the road of hell is paved with good intentions. The preacher reminds us that God is in heaven. He's listening to all your words and witnessing all your actions. Boy, I had to repent of some of my words lately and frustrated. It's not always the words that, it's my whole attitude at the time. Now, I could use excuses, but there is no excuse. And that's what you have to do. If you're going to really line yourself up to God, you have to take away excuses. I don't know how many of you have read Jeanette's post about excuses. It's really great. I suggest you get on Facebook and read it. You have to realize that we may be on earth. Yes, we are. We're limited by what we see, how we see, and lacking the means to properly perceive what's really going on around us. Because we're on earth. We're limited. We need to let our words be few. As believers, have we not heard or read the advice before? Yes, Matthew 5:36 and 37. Turn that with me. You all know it, but let's look at what he says. Jesus said this. And of course, he's got this Old Testament back here that he's inspired to back him up there as well. But let's look at Matthew 5. And it's in verses 36, 37. Gotta get there. It says, neither shalt thou swear by the head, because thou cannot make one hair white or black. But let your communications be yea, yea, nay, nay. For whatsoever is more than these cometh of evil. Don't we read the word evil in here too? It's evil. Look at Matthew 12 as well. Matthew 12. Go there. We're going to be looking at verses 35 through 37 in Matthew 12. I gotta get over there. Sorry. I'm always close and I have to turn a page. 35. Let's see, 35 to 37. And a good man out of the good treasures of the heart bringeth forth good things, and an evil man out of the evil treasure bringeth forth evil things. But I say unto you that every idle word that men shall speak, they shall give an account thereof in the day of judgment. For by the words thou shalt be justified, and by the words thou shalt be condemned. Idle words. Now James 3, we're not going to look at that, but I encourage you to. James 3, 2 through 10 tells us various things about the tongue. But if we control the tongue, It says we can control the whole body. But the truth is our tongues are often out of control. And it says the tongue is a fire of iniquity and sets on fire nature and hell. Nature and hell. What a statement. See, when it comes to earth, the tongue clearly causes fires of conflict. And when it comes to hell, it causes fires of great judgment on the soul. Because those words are hanging there as judgments. Those vain words. People, it's vital that out of faith we follow the preacher in his search. Consider his conclusions. Take serious his instructions so that we can know his wisdom. It is clear that his experiences were not a waste of time, but they brought him back to the only thing that could make sense, and that was God. It also brought him to the understanding that nothing makes sense outside of God. And finally, it led him back to the house of God in an attitude of true worship.